yeah, I'll share with the research findings coming out of my first research project where I used VR in the science education. So this project here, I actually have two manuscripts that I'm currently working on. And so I'll just give you a brief summary of the findings that are coming out of those two papers. So this project here, I come from that multimodality perspective, multimodal theory perspective. And so multimodality basically means that we honor both our language learners' verbal and nonverbal actions, such as their body language, their gestures, and even the distance, like between me and you, that matters, right? So all these kind of nonverbal actions, along with our spoken language and written language, those are all need to take into account when we are making sense of how our multilingual learners learn. And so through that multimodal perspective, we are recognizing that multilingual learners actually have very rich multilingual and multimodal resources within their linguistic repertoires. So if we stop thinking about that English should be the only medium of communications for our learners, we be able to recognize that our English learners are able to learn in an equal ground with those English native speakers. So that's kind of the framework that I'm coming from when I'm designing the intervention as well as working with our teachers. So the intervention that we developed, it's a 8-week-long science unit along with a virtual reality science game that we co-developed with our science teachers and ESL teachers. And so that unit is about scientific method and lab equipment and safety. So that GIF over there is kind of give you a snapshot of how that environment looked like within the VR room. And that picture over there shows you how one of our students were using the VR headset on the hallway to play the VR game. So MetaQuest VR was the VR's technology or the VR headsets that we were used. Basically, that sort of headset have high fidelity, meaning that the actions the students were doing in that virtual reality game has a very similar to how they are doing in the real life. Okay, because virtual reality, it does have different levels of fidelity. So this kind of high fidelity has additional potentials for allowing the students to use their nonverbal actions for learning. And so in that intervention, I further conducted pre and post knowledge tests, as well as recorded the entire 8-week-long lesson. And the constructs that I have been exploring out of my two papers, including their target science knowledge performance and their science literacy performance, and also their modes of meaning making throughout different kind of curricular activities within that unit. And so this is a mixed method study where I use paired sample t-test and COVA, and then also for the video data, I use the multimodal interaction analysis for analysis. All right, so this is my findings. I'll start with the quantitative analysis. So with the paired t-test that we conducted, we see that all of our learners, regardless their learner types or whether they are in the VR group or desktop group, we see significant improvements for both their science knowledge acquisition as well as their science literacy performance. And then when we look into the ANCOVA test, we see that our VR group actually outperformed our desktop group on both science knowledge and the science literacy performance. And then when we look at, when we compare our multilingual learners versus our English native speakers, thank God, there is no significant difference among these two type of groups. Especially in terms of the science concepts that were being taught both in our VR as well as from other additional curricular activities led by the teacher. Okay, but then there was one concept that's focused more on the experimental design that was only taught by the teacher without the VR scaffolding. That one we do see a significant difference between our English learners and our English native speakers. And so then we further look into using our qualitative analysis to look into what exactly is going on, why there are such a difference. So this is what we call module configuration. And so From up here, that's the most important modes of communication that were used during the activity by the learner to the least important modes of communications. So you can see that when the kids were playing VR, all the significance modes that he were using, those are all nonverbal actions. And then moving a little bit using some of his auditory receptions. And then the other example is when he was engaging in lectures in the class. Then in this situation, there are some opportunities for multimodal meaning making, because basically when the teacher was doing the lecture, she was asking the students to make observations. So she does prompt the students to say, use your sense of smell, use your sense of touch or whatever to make 3 observations of the classroom and stuff like that. So there was that sort of interactions for sure. But then mostly when the students were making sense of the concept, you can see that he was listening to the teacher talking, and then his way of meaning making is to take notes using the written language instead. So this kind of 2 different activities really shows you how that modes of configurations presented so differently when the student when engaging in VR versus when the students were engaging in those in-class activities. So that's where I kind of conclude that, well, I think this type of VR activities does have affordances and creating some new learning opportunities for our multilingual learners. So that's my presentation. Thank you so much.